As you come in, the first site is the Prag Mahal, which is in Bhuj in Gujarat. So it's an old palace that I visited when I was on holiday. I was quite struck by the condition of the palace, and also the sort of the reception. So people were kind of visiting it as if everything was fine, and I was kind of, wow, things are quite damaged, and because of the earthquake, a lot of it was closed. And I was kind of interested in this sort of connection to a colonial past that was visible within the architecture and also the hunting trophies and things like that. And the fact that they were collapsing and rotting, I thought was quite a good sort of analogy with how I saw India developing. So there's kind of idea that this past, this colonial past, is fading away, and it has a horror to it, that colonial past. And I thought that with some of the animal heads, you get this sense of horror and kind of pain. And I thought this was quite a nice way of showing this change in India, and a sort of positive change in India, especially at a time when in Europe, where we seem to be going down the toilet as such. And then in the house in France, this was again somewhere I visited, and I was struck by the Frenchness. I thought it was very beautiful. I thought it would be nice to photograph it, and then I found out the family who owned it were in a conflict within the family between two sisters, and they would have to sell the house because they couldn't make a decision about who should have the house. So I like that kind of idea of this tension between the sort of beautiful house and the fact that because it is so beautiful and so loved that no one can have it. With the hotel in Cairo, I was again just staying there on holiday, and I was speaking to the owners of the hotel, and they explained how it used to be owned by Italians. Again, so it had this kind of colonial history to it. And this Egyptian family were running it, and they decided to keep it in the state it was when it was owned by Italians. So they cleaned it, but they didn't really decorate. They didn't do much to it. And they were talking that they might have to sell it to be redeveloped. And I thought that it'd be quite nice to capture it in its present state, because it is really, really beautiful. And I think it's a bit of a shame if all these places just become the Hilton or something. I think it's a shame because you lose all of that past. The Picasso in Palestine is different to the other three places because it's something that's coming into being as opposed to something that's maybe fading from existing. The work was transported internationally into Palestine with Palestine on the address label. They don't have a state, they're stateless people, so they don't have passports. They just have ID cards. So they don't sort of exist internationally, I think. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but because it doesn't exist, it had to come through Israel, and they had to accept that they were going to forward it to Palestine. The reason why I have the guards there is partly there are guards in the room, but we kind of formally put them in the picture, partly because this is how the press pictures were. And I put them there because they seem to be so integral to the work. So the Picasso itself is not that significant in the painting itself. It's just the fact that it is a Picasso. And the guards are part of the piece of work. They're sort of part of the installation of that piece of work. So that's kind of why they're behind the barriers. It's sort of like an oxymoron when you do still life photography, because you're just capturing stillness. And so you can't tell how long the exposure is or anything like that, because it's just objects staying there. And I sort of like that. And also, they're sort of decontextualized somewhat. So in the house in France, you're not quite sure what room, where these objects are. There's no context. And I kind of like that idea that we never really understand a context. We can only kind of glimpse at it.